Welcome back to Radio Juxtapoz. My name's Doug Gillen, and on today's episode, I'm in conversation with the Nigerian-born, UK-based visual artist and concept photographer, Àsìkò. Ade Okilaran, as he's known to his parents, explores the history of West African Yoruba heritage through photography and various visual medias. Under his chosen moniker Àsìkò, a Yoruba reference to both time and place, he creates digital collages which combine elements of film photography and AI to elevate his images into ethereal worlds. His subjects are often female, in an attempt to explore the inequalities that lie in the treatment of women in modern Nigerian culture. Through this work, Àsìkò invites us, the audience, to take on issues surrounding the deeply patriarchal structures alongside the use of female genital mutilation. This use of AI also allows him as a photographer to develop the visual elements of Yoruba folklore and showcases the many gods and deities that permeate the culture. On the 16th of March, Àsìkò will feature as part of a group exhibition, Rites of Passage, at the Britannia St Gagosian in London. We'd also like to thank those at the MT Art Agency for letting us hijack their office space to record this interview together. And I also have to make a somewhat sheepish apology in advance. During this interview, in reference to Yoruba culture, you'll hear me use the word Yoruban, which isn't accurate, as in fact Yoruba references both a singular and a collective. So when I say Yoruban heritage, it really should just be Yoruba heritage. Of course, I only found this out after the interviews, so please accept my apologies on this misstep. As always, if you do enjoy this interview, please let us know online and feel free to drop us a review or give us a follow on the socials. All the links will be in the show notes of this episode. That's it from me right now. Enjoy the episode. I always like doing these in this kind of like... We've had a couple of exchanges and that's it. And we're just going to go straight into now a long form conversation to just see where it goes. So I'm genuinely, in the very short space of time that we have been talking, I'm looking forward to seeing where this goes. First and foremost, thank you for agreeing to sit down. I really do appreciate that. One of the starting points for me though was digging through your website and everything like that. The first phrase that really jumped out at me was concept photographer. What's a concept photographer?
That's a very good... Maybe it's good to go back, to go forward. So I started as a photographer that took photographs of everything. I took photographs of plants, of people, of landscapes. I was interested in the world when I first got my camera. And then I found I was more interested in ideas and talking about things which were resonant to me as a person. And so that's kind of where the idea concept started to come in. It started to be about a concept as opposed to a literal sense. It was more about a concept. So what are my feelings about myself? What are my feelings about my identity? What about my feelings about where I've come from, Nigeria? What are my feelings about being British and Nigerian? And so that stuff starts to creep into the work, because when I started to look for the questions of who I am and in the space I exist in, then shouldn't that come into the work that I create? But it wasn't like, oh, I thought about it and it has to be in the work. It's more... I was exploring photography, I was exploring life. There starts to be some sort of synergy. So the word concept has come from these ideas. It's funny because I'm a photographer and that's where it all started. But I think right now I'm in this space where because I'm mixing things, I would say I'm now a visual artist because I've started to pull things in. So I'm pulling aspects of sculpture, I'm working with AI, then I'm combining AI into my photographs. Then I've shot a film, I directed a film. So there are all these different things that now make up what I do now in my practice.
I love the phrase mixed media because it's such a vague piece of terminology that artists just throw in. They're like, It's mixed media.
It is mixed media.
So when did this exploration into these further parts come? You know, what I'm looking at, if I jump onto your Instagram, it's definitely not straight photography.
No, it's not. And we should be allowed to experiment, and then technology brings things, but then old art brings things as well. So I like to use my hands. So right now I'm in that phase of using my hands. So some of the work is adorned with jewelry. Some of it is AI art. And then I'm taking the AI art and combining it with photography. What I love about AI is it's making me imagine new things to bring into the artwork. I can create a piece that doesn't exist, you know, and put it as a crown on a woman's head, but it's a crown I've made up based on using AI art. So in some way, I'm allowing myself to be human, and to be human, you know, we want to experiment, we want to try different things. We, as a creative, as an artist, you want to try different things. I think the world is opening up, so I can, and so I'm enjoying that bit right now, just to be able to just move into different things. And then there's sculpture as well, so a lot.
I think for, I was going to say for the audience, but actually equally just for me as well, this idea of, you know, you're saying like I use AI to create this crown as if it was, you know, oil on a brush. And can you just explain, you know, in kind of layman's terms, what that means when you say, I'm using AI to create something? If I look at one of your, and this is maybe a second part to the question, if I look at an image that's on your Instagram, what's the percentage of that would have just been generated through AI versus how much of it is you staging a photo shoot and creating and dressing the models and styling and everything like that?
So it's quite interesting. So AI came to me in September last year. And it's kind of taken my work, not in a different direction, but more, it's added new things into it. Essentially, for me, AI is just a tool. Like the way I use a camera is the way I use AI. So it's, you have to understand its limitations, understand how well you can use it. You are only limited by your creativity. Some of the images on my Instagram, there was one person who was actually scrolling and they couldn't tell what was what. So in some cases, oh, is this AI? And then, you know, I get comments, oh, is this AI? No, that's a straight up photograph. Mm. I think AI hasn't taken anything away. It's more brought new things in. So when you talk about the crown, let's take the crown. Or let's take, I don't know if you can see, you probably can't see these images.
I'll throw it on the... Actually, no, for the podcast, no, we can't see the images.
We can't see the images. So I've got a series called She Is Adorned. Essentially, it's a collage. These are all collages. They're taking different things. So a lot of cultural references are in there. Anything from, you know, the armor the lady is wearing, how it's inferred with all these cultural symbols. All of those things are taken. So in some cases, I photographed those things when I've been, you know, on my travels, you know, when I'm in Nigeria, I have like a big image library, and I take some of these things and use them in the images. So I photographed, the model, and I know what I'm trying to do. I photograph the model, and then I bring all these cultural symbolisms into the work. I've just used AI. I've just started to use AI to do what I do with actually taking a photograph and then superimposing it on my subject to tell the story. Now I'm using AI to do that. But what I'm doing with the AI is I'm expanding things that don't even exist and using based on cultural mythology that I know from the past, from my research, I've taken all of those. So when I'm creating stuff in AI, my prompts can be stupidly long. And prompts are, you're talking to this AI system and say, create this. And there's a lot of pauses and sentences trying to make sure I can get as much of, or as close to what I see in my head through the AI system. And then in some cases, I'll take that. I'm creating some work for a museum in Nigeria right now. and what was I doing? So we were creating a mythological character called Shango. Shango is essentially very similar to Thor and it's always interesting because how is it that all these different cultures have these?
So you've created this character. This isn't a Yoruban character.
It is.
Oh, it is. Okay, sorry.
So it's a Yoruban character.
Okay, yeah. Wow.
So I photographed him when I went to Nigeria. I photographed the character. We did some styling and all of that. But now I've taken it into AI. So what I've done I've created a futuristic city of what Lagos would look like. And it's the idea of looking to a better tomorrow using the cultural references from the past. So I've photographed this character. I've taken to create in the background this futuristic Lagos city. His hammer, I'm not going to get a hammer anywhere which resembles what I've seen in my head. He has an axe/hammer, so I created that in AI. But I've thought of all of this stuff before I actually shot, so I know how his hand needs to be. And I've put something in his hand and I've replaced it with that. So for me, it's added to what I do as a collage artist to be able to pull things into the images.
Just hearing this idea of like a kind of a Lagos under a Yoruban vision, it just almost harked back to Black Panther. How is this an intentional kind of like, okay, did this influence you, or is it separate? The idea of kind of like a Wakanda being, this is what Africa could look like without the European hand.
So that's a loaded and interesting question. There are two responses to that. One, I'm always influenced by comic mythology. It's as a kid, my head was knee deep in graphic novels, anything from Superman to Batman to Black Panther to Spider-Man. And I feel like part of my work is inspired by that, even if I'm not sure how, but I do feel in terms of characters, in terms of bigger, larger than life characters, I think there's some influences there. That is always going to be there. And Black Panther, visualizing it, when it came out in the film, but I'd already seen it in the comics as a kid anyway, but visualizing it helped. It's more also about looking to the future. Well, what could we be like if we shook off some of these colonial shackles, if we shook off our own trauma, if we shook off and looked to the future and looked to create this city where we have clean energy? Because right now, Nigeria, one of the biggest problems is their power cuts. For a country that, is quite a big country and we have all these dams, there are power cuts and they shouldn't be. We supply power to Benin Republic, which is a smaller country. And I've been to Benin, I do projects there. And Benin hardly has any power cuts, but Nigeria has. So it has a lot of problems. So for me, it's envisioning a better future where there is energy. And Shango, electricity, he's energy. So he is in that space of creating this futuristic Lagos.
And it's not just Yoruban mythology and culture that you do explore through your work. I mean, I think it's largely there, but like you were saying, you see threads in Norse mythology and things like that. So the more you read on these different cultures, the more similarities do you start to see through them?
So I think the human story is very connected, and it's quite scary because now everything is we're quite divided, but the human stories have been similar in all these mythologies. And, they have these larger than life characters, some are deities of war or of energy or of thunder and lightning. And, they both carry hammers. So Shango and Thor, they both carry hammers. Both warrior disposition type characters, both have an anger and a disposition sometimes to violence as well. Norse is very far from Yoruba. Or I'm looking at Loki, the trickster type deities, but also very messenger type deities, Loki and then Eshu, that. So those things kind of they interest me, looking back, because mythologies inform how societies are right now. And that's what I'm really trying to understand, how these mythologies inform the cultures that we have right now, understanding how that can affect a better tomorrow, because I feel we shouldn't template our cultures based on other cultures. Everybody's like westernization. Well, yeah, westernization is good. It has its good things. But how do you inform your own culture based on who you are as a people? Western politics won't work in Nigeria. It doesn't work in Nigeria. We tried, but it really, really doesn't work. It's a bit of a mess. So we need to look back at how our societies were built, take aspects of Western ideology, and then take aspects of ourselves and make sure it works for us moving forward into a better tomorrow.
I'd like to talk and explore this relationship with Nigeria then, because it's obviously permeates the work, and it obviously comes through in just the very short space of time that we've been talking. First of all, what brought you to the UK? I'm interested to see how the memories of a place inform your relationship with it as that time goes by and the space becomes maybe greater. So yeah, could you maybe sort of talk about that a little bit?
So I moved here close to 2000, A-levels, that kind of stuff. Now, I was born here, but my parents were part of that generation who came to study in the UK to get, university. Mm-hmm. So both my parents are accountants, and then they moved back. The idea is they come study here and then move back and, start jobs. So they both got great jobs at the time. They moved back, started a family and all of that. So I grew up in Nigeria till, 16, 17, and then I moved back here.
So a good part of your formative years, for sure.
We're definitely in Nigeria. So, and so on moving back, it was quite an interesting period of time, because in a way, they brought me back and it was like, okay, they put me with my uncle, I was staying with my uncle, and, I was doing A-levels and just going to school. But it was quite a challenging time for me to adapt to this new space. And the older I got, I really started to appreciate the culture that I didn't appreciate when I lived in Nigeria. Mm-hmm. Part of the cultural exploration is about me finding out about who I am and where I come from. And so that's where some of the work kind of spills out, or that exploration spills into the work.
Was there a catalyst moment for you, and when you sort of kind of had that light bulb go off and you're like, shit, I've had this whole thing that's been part of my life, but I actually don't really know much about it?
That's interesting. I always hear that eureka moment. I never have any of that. I find it's gradual, or maybe I'm not paying attention to that specific moment, but it's gradual. And maybe it's the human experience. It's like, who am I? What am I doing here? Who do I want to be? And maybe in trying to answer those questions, because I think in terms of these questions, they were always there, but they really started to come to the forefront after my university days, and just me being a man in this space that's foreign, but familiar, but foreign, and trying to grapple with, sometimes I go to Nigeria and like, you're not Nigerian, and I come here, you're not English, and I'm this new breed of person.
Too English for the Nigerians, yeah, exactly. Too Nigerian for the English.
Exactly. And I now have made peace with this space that I exist in, this hybrid person who is comfortable with both of these cultural structures. And I'll go to Nigeria and say, you're not Nigerian. I'm Nigerian. Might not be the Nigerian but I am Nigerian. And I am British. So if anybody here tells me you're not British, I'm like, yeah. Yes, I am. So for me, I live in this space of being confident in who I am in this space that I exist in now.
And I assume this confidence didn't just come.
It's a journey we all have to take, regardless of whether Nigerian, British, or wherever we are. We have to get to this space where there's a confidence in who we are. That is part of that journey. And if we don't know, then that has to be questioned, who we are. Because life's challenging. So find the confidence to be able to stand within the 1,000 storms that are going to come. There is no escape from them, except we want to hide under a rock, which is not going to do anybody any good. So for me, I had to go on that journey. Some of it's organic, some of it, the older I get, the more intentional I am about the journey.
This is a pretty loaded question. It's a question I've asked many people, and I just find it a particular interesting concept because it's such a loaded word. But where or what for you then, as someone that's kind of battling with this sense of place and identity, not necessarily battling, but exploring actively, where or what is home for you?
Ooh. I think there are a few ways to look at this. Home is, I believe it's this construct, and it is a construct based on every individual's idea of what home is. So for me, home right now is that space I exist in with my wife, because we're both working as a team to make this space fulfilling to both of us in our journey. So my journey is quite intertwined with hers. And
organically, or you've actively you've built it that way?
It's actively. I find it's hard to just, and this is kind of a bit of my marriage journey, which you'll probably kill me for talking about. But it's more, we got married and we thought, and then you find actually have to be intentional. We have to be intentional about us loving one another, about date nights, about dealing with conflict, about dealing with, we ain't got no money. How are we going to cope? How can we work together? This is a budget. We have to work at this together. It's going to be challenging for this period of time, but there is always light at the end of the tunnel. So home is that space that we've made together. And for some people, home is more their sanctity and their state of mind and being able to just be calm wherever they are. It can also take up a physical representation. For right now, we've just recently moved to Mill Hill. We are trying to make Mill Hill home. I think there usually will be some sort of sweet spot where we feel like, this is home. There's a lot of renovations and stuff going on, so it doesn't completely feel like home, but I know there will be this point where it does. So it can take up that physical embodiment, but I think it's a state of mind. And it's hard as well, because whenever I go back to Africa, or Nigeria it feels like home because it's tied to a lot of emotional stuff as a kid. So it's nostalgic. But I've been going to other African countries, and I know Benin Republic, which is next door to Nigeria, feels like home.
I was going to say that, they feel like home. So the places that you've physically never been or had a relationship with, suddenly you get there and you're like, actually, this is home.
Yeah.
What do you think that is? Is a sense of, is this going ancestral? Is this like something woven into your DNA, or is this something just a feeling?
Well, isn't it a both of those things? It's that whole ancestral connection, but also it's that feeling that you have, when you get off the plane and the warm air hits your face and the smell and everything, and then the vibrancy of the people. And then there's that heat as well, which is different from the heat here. I don't understand why it's different, but it just feels different. And those things make it feel like home. And I feel there's a level of comfortable, even though I don't know the terrain, there's a level of comfortable that I feel being. And so for me, it's prompted, I have to do Africa through my lifetime. I might not get to every single country, but I want to be able to explore Africa, explore in the work, but also explore the space as well.
I'm going to veto Nigeria from the answer because that's got too much of a connection. Outside of Nigeria, have you got any personal highlights of places that you've discovered or ventured into in Africa?
Yeah, so I haven't done as much as I should have, but this is an ongoing journey. But Benin Republic, just because it also has that close Yoruba culture in Benin Republic, but it's just this place, the people, even though they're Yoruba in Benin Republic and they're Yoruba in Nigeria.
We've used this word, a few times, and maybe again, kind of like the AI explanation. Can you maybe just who are the Yoruban people and what is Yoruban culture? Is it a type of people? Is it an ethnicity? Is it a religion? Is it all these things? yeah. So for the listener, can you maybe just sort of define what it is we're talking about here?
So the Yoruba people Yoruba is the people, it's the language, it's the ethnicity, but the Yoruba people are southwest Nigeria, basically on the coast. But you have quite a few, it's quite diverse even within it. It's crazy. There are like nearly 200 dialects of Yoruba. So I can hear a Yoruba person with another dialect. I can make out some words I might not even.
So like if you were having a full-on conversation with them, you might not be able to.
So it depends on where they are. So in Yoruba land, as I would say, there are about 5 or 6 states in Nigeria which are Yoruba speaking. Mm-hmm. Now, the ones in Lagos where I'm from, those ones I can definitely understand. And if you start, the further north you start to move, and I'll get certain words, some words I might not get, but I hardly ever come across, it's only when I go to Nigeria, but not in the UK. In the UK, I meet mainly just Yoruba people from Lagos or Ogun State.
Can you tell a Yoruban person as soon as you meet them without them saying much? Because I can see a Scot, I'm from Scotland, I can see a Scot a mile away. There's a sadness in their eyes.
That's so interesting. I thought Scottish people, all the Scottish people I met, are actually quite jovial.
Yeah.
And they're quite a life.
We laugh through the sadness. Because you have to.
Oh, I love that, laugh through the sadness. So it's interesting. I can usually recognize Nigerians and Yoruba people, sometimes by just seeing. And it's not everybody that can do this, but I think Africans can kind of tell if somebody's from the north side of Africa, if they're East, if they're South African, they can kind of tell facially, body type, now that's a generalization and sometimes it doesn't work. Yeah. But West African people, I can kind of tell once somebody opens their mouth, even with a British accent, I can start to tell because there's certain ways, especially if the person speaks Yoruba, you can't hide because Yoruba is a certain accent and dialect that makes you pronounce words even when you change your accent to English, you can still kind of tell.
I almost hate asking this, but I've kind of got to. Could you say something in Yoruban?
Whoa. Oh my God. Oh
you guys are talking about it.
Okay.
I wouldn't ever normally ask that question, but it's
right.
because it's just suddenly become such a focal point. And I think actually it would be quite nice to hear. We're talking about this sound.
I'm scared to do it on camera because the Yoruba people will...
Because you're doing good.
Yeah, they'll be like, what the hell is he saying? So, Kilon Shele, my guy. Meaning, what's happening, my guy? Or Baoni, how are you?
Perfect. Thank you.
I'm probably gonna get crucified online.
No, you're not. There's a disclaimer in the screen. It's fine. I think it's an open-minded audience. You're listening to Àsìkò in conversation with myself, Doug Gillen, here on Radio Juxtapoz. Coming up in this next half, we open things up a little as we get further into religion, fatherhood, and a whole lot more. Stay with us right here on Radio Juxtapoz in conversation with Àsìkò. I feel like I should probably ask you one of the fucking fundamental obvious questions I was supposed to ask you. What got you into photography and when did it creep in? Or did it creep? Sorry, maybe it was a fucking lightning bolt.
Yeah, I don't get lightning bolts. I found I actually don't get those moments. Yeah. So as a kid, my dad collected art. He had, local painters, their works on sculptures, paintings. Our home was filled with stuff, and he had an appreciation for art. So that was my first foray into artwork, just seeing those beautiful pieces. Then as a kid, I was always in awe of the Renaissance period, from Italy and Germany as well. I loved the drama, the spirituality, the epic scope of Michelangelo, of Leonardo da Vinci's. I loved that work. So all of that started to sow seeds and visual notes in my head without me knowing that it was there. I actually went, I have Nigerian parents, so the idea of being an artist or photographer was a non-entity.
Accountant Nigerian parents at that.
That was never going to be a thing. So, and I wasn't one of those children who said, you know what, I'm going to do what I want. That would never even happen in an African or Nigerian household. So I have a chemistry degree, have a master's in bioinformatics. I worked in the pharmaceutical industry for quite a number of years, but I slowly moved into photography. So even when I was working in that industry, when I had some money, actually, my mom bought me this little Casio camera.
So it's her fault.
Kind of her fault. She just bought a camera. She didn't know. She just thought it was a dinky, crappy. Nobody's would you. Casio doesn't even make cameras. I don't know why I had this camera. After about 3 months, got rid of it. Got an SLR. Just started to take photographs. It wasn't about a career. This is just a new hobby I enjoy. But all these visual notes from my past kept creeping in. And I think that started to inform the idea of the word concept, as opposed to, oh, here's a pretty picture. No, I just don't want to make a pretty picture. I want to make a picture that has meaning, that has weight to it. So taking photographs, and then I started to understand there is this thing called art, and then started to dive into that. All the while just enjoying this as a hobby. And then people started asking me to shoot their weddings, which was crazy.
Did you do the wedding side? Okay, I bet they were good because and even just like digging through on your website, even when I look at what was clearly the earlier work pre, the digital collage and the pre-AI, it feels like it's the hand of an artist. It doesn't feel like a commercial corporate, here's your wedding.
Yeah. I thank you. I enjoyed it I think I did it for about a year and a half, maybe 2012 or 2010. And then I stopped. It was funny. I got married and then I hated doing weddings. And it wasn't because of our wedding in any way, but I was just like...
Disclaimer.
Yes, honey, not about that. But it was weird. We had our wedding and I had one or two, I shot a wedding after. I was like, I actually don't really care for this.
Once you've seen how the sausage is made.
But I actually think it was more, I wanted to make things as opposed to capture things. And I think that was where I started. It was becoming my natural progression to make work. So make whatever is going into this photograph and make it whatever I wanted to make it with a vision or whatever. And then, so I packed up weddings and then I started just photographing. I went a bit into fashion.
I was going to say that would be the second place where I would have seen an influence come, because if I look at your studio work particularly, that lighting is not that's informed. This is something that I think is really possibly maybe particularly from a white audience, it might be underexplored or underappreciated how much effort you've put into your lighting and how to make that just to really make your subject stand out in a particular way, that doesn't just happen. That comes through learning and through practice and all these things, and I can very much see that. So there, and I think that the main space that would have existed would have been fashion.
Yeah. I funny thing is, I'm not a fashion photographer. I thought I wanted to be, but I found that I was just more interested in the story. But clothes help tell an interesting story. How you style the person. So I started to understand styling, how you put things together, what jewelry to use, and all of that stuff. So that started to inform my photograph practice as well. And so even the work now, anything from when you look at anything that I've created, I've either worked with a stylist or I've styled it myself, but me going into the fashion world and understanding how things work there was helpful. And all of these things, I don't take any of these roads for granted, even my previous career. I don't take it all for granted because they've helped inform what I do now, and nothing was ever lost. It was just part of me becoming, more proficient at creating the artwork that I create now. So messed around with fashion, but it was still very much about the story, the concept, the idea. And so at one time I was thinking, would I do this commercially? But I found I had no interest in doing it commercially. So I just wanted to focus on the story.
So there was never a point where you were just a commercial photographer?
There was, and it sucked.
Okay.
Yeah. So there was a period of time when I was living in Belgium with my wife. I'd been working at Johnson & Johnson, saved up some money, and they were like, okay, we're coming back to the UK. I'm going to quit my career as a data architect, and I'm going to start being a full-time photographer, a commercial full-time photographer. Mm-hmm. And now that was when I was considering maybe it should be fashion, maybe not. So I came back. I didn't really get work. It was very weird. I mean, I was getting work, but it was one or two things. Thank God there were savings, but the savings were running out after about a year. They're not going to last. The rent alone was. And so I went into this period of depression. Nobody was hiring. And also, I think I wasn't in a good place to even create anymore. I wasn't really creating anymore. And I was just looking, where's the next gig coming? Where's the next gig? Chasing.
That's the vicious part. When you're chasing the bag, it suddenly becomes something completely different. And then you start, it's like you start splashing around and you start drowning.
And then you start doing rubbish work, or you start getting yourself involved in work you really shouldn't. Then there is the creation is not interesting anymore, and then it affects all the other aspects of my life. So I'm with my wife, and I'm snapping at her. We're struggling in our marriage at that time as well. Yeah, she's probably gonna kill me now.
She's not. This is an honest conversation. It's supposed to be an honest conversation. There was something really that hit me earlier. It was, you had talked about this idea of the marriage, and it's like, we are programmed from the age of 4 that every film we watch, every single film we watch, they have the kiss and the happily ever after, and you never see the marriage. The idea of love finishes at the moment where they get together, right?
I swear to God. Hollywood, I know you guys are, it's a whole big marketing campaign for America and everything. And I love film, but it is terrible. It does not inform well at all. Kids grow up with this idea of what life should be, and they've seen a lot of stuff from films, and it is not true.
And that's why people feel depressed.
Exactly, because there's expectation. It's expectation. And when you have that sort of expectation, then it's a problem when things don't fall into place. And I think it is the journey of every human being to be awake in the world that we live in. And I'm not saying woke, but to be awake and to try and understand the space that they exist in, and try and understand that what we see being fed to us is not necessarily complete truth. You have to find your bubble and find how to exist in your bubble, because there's so much stuff being bombarded. You just need to put on the TV or open up your laptop, and we are bombarded with stuff. And if we go with the flow and are not stoic in the midst of all of this noise, we will get carried away. And that is not great for any person or their mental health, or who they want to be as a person.
So talking about this, the space that you were in, we kind of moved into the mental health conversation, but I'm interested because you were talking about, you were doing the commercial work that wasn't fulfilling, but there must have been a moment or something there. How did you get into the space where you were able to create as an artist, as a concept photographer? How were you able to navigate through this without having to sell your soul back?
This is definitely not a Hollywood story in terms of, maybe I created something and then it exploded and then I became this. Nah, life is interesting. And I'm very thankful to my connection and relationship with God, because I feel that's been at the center. That has saved my marriage. It has saved my health as a person. So one of the interesting things I found was...
Are we talking Christian God?
Christian God. Sorry, okay. Christian God.
For that, because that's inviting a whole bunch of questions.
Yeah, of course. I am. It's the interesting thing was, I felt an inkling to just take a breath, and the path that I'm going on is not going to work out great. So take a breath and step back. And in stepping back and being able to find thoughts and being able to center myself, I found that if I continue down this trajectory of chasing this dream, it's not going to work out. So I went back to my previous line of work as a data architect. And it was hard because I didn't want to do it.
Because you had a little taste. You had seen that there could have been this thing behind the camera.
I did, but remember, I was just a photographer. I was more a commercial type photographer. It wasn't what I was always supposed to be. I wanted it, I wanted to make images that would go on billboards, do those commercial things. So I quit photography, went back to my 9-to-5, worked. But you know the strangest thing? I only started to create the things I wanted to create. I stopped caring about money because now financially, I'm not just living for myself. I'm now married. So I need to make sure we are taken care of. I need to make sure we have some plans or something. Mm-hmm. So I didn't want money to be an issue anymore. So I went back and I did. But the thing is, I didn't have as much time to create. So the time I had to create, I only created the stuff that was important. Cut out all the fat, cut out all the stuff that was not needed, only the stuff I needed to create. And in doing that, over the next set of years, I really honed my craft. And it wasn't about anybody, it was about me. There was a lot of introspection through that time. A lot of the work became formed, my ideas, who I am, being a Nigerian living in the UK, all of that stuff started to really come to the surface. And it was just about enjoying what I do, and then the word artist started to come into the whole idea of what I do right now, because I'd never really thought about that word.
Were you quite disciplined in the structure of the time that you were allowing yourself and what you were doing with this? It's not just like, okay, cool, I'll do a little bit here, I'll tinker here. Was it like, okay, cool, I have in my weekend, I have 8 hours that I'm given. I need to make the most of this time.
Essentially, that was it. I had to be structured, because you also have a life, you know, you're married, or you have stuff that you need to do. There's family. So yeah, exactly. So you need to be able to structure your time to make artwork or make photographs, or, you know, I enjoyed sometimes where I would just go out really early in the morning. So I have this work that I've shown maybe once or twice, but it's something I'm building, and I want to continue to build it. They're using an infrared camera to take photographs of the British countryside. So I just go out early in the morning, take these photographs, you know, when the sun is coming up, or just, and infrared photography is different. It sees light completely differently. It's not how, you know, what we see in visible light. There's an absence of color in infrared.
For a listener, what does, like, if you were to describe what an infrared capture might look like, is it, because initially I was picturing one of those things where it's like, you know, the body cam of a soldier going in to get, you know, Osama bin Laden or something like that.
It's quite ethereal, and that's why I'm drawn to it.
That's a word that I associate very closely with your work, okay. Ethereal. It feels like, particularly with the use of the AI and the digital stuff, that ethereal really starts to come through.
Yes, you're right. It's ethereal. It reminds me of when I read those, like, you know, these old children's stories like Enid Blyton and stuff like that, how I envisioned these beautiful magical worlds. And so I tie some of that stuff as a kid into those images. So I guess there's an element of fantasy in the images, but those are images that I've been making. So the infrared images will have absence of color. The trees, by switching around the colors, the trees are white. So everything green is white. So it has a very, it's otherworldly. That's the word. So sometimes I would just go take some time for my mental health, but just to enjoy being in nature, do those photographs. So I was conscious about the time I spent making photographs, because as we have to be adults, and being an adult ain't easy. So you have to kind of structure things. Well, that's what I found.
How does that shift work for your practice, which really initially was a form of almost catharsis, a place of calm and a place of creative fulfillment, once the safety net of the data analyst or data architect, once the safety net of that goes, and then suddenly that calming space of creativity is now the breadwinner, and that's the main source of income and everything like that, how does that change your relationship with your practice? Because it goes suddenly from something of escapism into something that now is, there's a dependence on it.
So, you know, I'll say this again, there was no eureka moment. I find that I never have those. Maybe one day I will, but it was very gradual. So it was more, I had to build this thing and this practice. But one of the things I was fortunate in building work that was just very personal was people started to ask for that work. And then people started to want to put it on their walls. So for me, it was a natural progression. And, you know, that side of things built up so much that it was undeniable. And it was what I wanted to do anyway, but it was undeniable. But I just didn't wake up like I did the first time and say, I'm done.
I quit.
Yeah, I have to be responsible. So I have to take the right steps. And maybe this is stuff I've learned from my parents. My parents were both accountants. Are accountants, and they're both quite cautious. I'm possibly the more crazy person to jump, and I did it once, but I didn't want to be burned again. So I had to take it more carefully, and you know, for my future, for my family, I needed to be more thoughtful and more present with taking that step. So it's more gradual. And then when I felt the time was right, I decided to, not take on another contract and just focus on the work. But I enjoy it a lot. Sometimes it's challenging, as any job is, but I enjoy it a lot because it's something that I want to create. It's something that I want to, it's something that comes from me. And I'm fortunate enough that, people want to buy it, or people want to hear what I have to say, or whatever. That for me is a blessing, because it's not, I don't actually think it's as easy to find what your calling is, or what you think you might be great at. I don't think it's as easy, because if it was, a lot of people would be doing that, and we'd be living a lot more fulfilled lives. Because sometimes, money, we want to make money and, take care of ourselves in the world we live in. But to be able to be fulfilled in that way is not the easiest of things.
Let me go back to, where does the meeting point, or how does the relationship work between a practicing Christian and a Yoruban?
The interesting thing is, we curate the life that we make. We curate it. We pull things in and out. My culture is a beautiful thing. It informs how I relate to people. When I meet people, you have to treat them with a certain level of respect. And then if they are older, you treat them even with more respect. You have to be respectful to your elders. You have to be hospitable as a person. So if somebody comes to your house, the thing culturally to do is, invite them in, sit them down. Do they want to eat? So these are things that I've taken in from my culture. So my culture informs my, I guess, way of life, but my connection to the divine is my Christian faith, and is that journey that I believe and I trust God through the challenges that I experience on a daily basis. God is my source and my strength, and for me, He helps inform how I even relate to my wife and stuff. So I think for me, there's a certain level of combination, and for me, that spirituality is my Christian faith. And I won't say I have this whole thing figured out, and maybe this is part of the journey as well, understanding what makes me me, and how that's connected to my ancestry, how my, how can I put it? My parents and their ancestry, all of them, how they connect to me and how they inform me as a person, and their hopes and their dreams in a strange way. But God is at the center of that whole thing, and He informs who I am. So I think spirituality is an interesting thing, and I think as human beings we're all spiritual, even if you don't believe in a God. There's a level of spirituality, of connection to something which is a little bit more than we are, because in a way, isn't that how we? Is that how we bring ourselves together and work together as a unit? Because if we abandon all things and we think there is nothing more to us.
I love the people that are principled enough and strong enough to have the complete, to have that viewpoint where it's pure nihilism, pure chaos. There is no greater force. This is all random. Nothing means anything. Your actions do not contribute. They do not mean anything. There is when you die, you are dust. I think that is such a brilliantly hard-lined view to take that removes any notion of spirituality or romanticism from the fundamental existence of everything that we know. To remove that is such a hard line to take.
I'm finding navigating my world as a man, I need a source. And I have these sort of jousting sort of conversations about the existence of God with friends. And I found, one of the things I tell them is this works for me when I've hit rock bottom, or when I did hit and things were very challenging. It was my faith that took me through. It was my faith that God at the center of my marriage helped my marriage work beyond what I could, I was led, but it worked because of that.
Yeah, I love that.
If that working, for me, it's the most beautiful thing, because I'm finding that I'm navigating through scripture, through connection to God. I'm navigating this life and I'm making it work because of that. Now, I'm not one of those people who can intellectually joust, about, God and this. And I feel it's such a personal thing, and it's not something that I'm going to push on anybody. My thing is, this has worked for me, and it's been a beautiful thing for me.
I think that's when religion and spirituality becomes its most effective, and when it becomes its most beautiful, when it is seen as a personal thing. And it's not about me pushing an ideology, pushing an agenda, saying you are bad if you do not conform to my belief, and all these things. Like religion at its absolute best, which I think is the vast majority of people who are religious do believe that it is a personal thing between them and their beliefs or whatever it might be. I think that's when it's most effective to help create that framework and that support network within yourself of how you find how you find hope through hard times, and how you inform the relationships that you have with around you, and how you're cultivating these things. That's a really beautiful thing, and I think that's, as someone that has no religion in their life, that's something that I do envy to a degree. I think that that's such a beautiful thing that I think a large part of modern society particularly has definitely lost. And I think because I think my skepticism with it all, and this becomes, maybe it's part of because maybe it's white guilt. Maybe maybe it's like white guilt in the sense that I can't detach myself from the structures of organized religion. So I couldn't look at Christianity without thinking about the Crusades, without thinking, particularly for a Nigerian practicing Christianity, I can't detach myself from an institution that I fundamentally disagree with. And that comes in the way, these organizations and these structures come between me connecting with a sense of spirituality.
Yeah, there's a lot of truth to that. So one of the things I found is human beings will do human beings. We're always human being and just being what the hell we are. So anything that we have, that we're given, which is beautiful, take sex. It's a beautiful thing, right? But we mangle it and we mess with it, and it becomes this whole different, and it can be whatever it is, and it becomes not great. But at the essence of it, it's still a beautiful thing. So it's understanding that human beings will just do what we'll just do whatever. And we're flawed, we're broken, our past traumas inform the stupid mistakes that we make, but sometimes we can't help it because we're human beings. But I believe in God and his grace and his love for us, that regardless of the things that we do, we are accepted and we are loved. And so it also helped reframe my relationship with my dad, because my dad is a Nigerian man, doesn't show emotion. I don't even think he ever said he loved me. And I think maybe when he said it when I was much older, it was a very strange thing that my brain...
you off guard.
Yeah, my brain couldn't comprehend it. And it was like, why are you telling me this?
What the fuck are you talking to?
Yeah, so... But I had to reframe that because, I'm soon going to become a dad, and I need to know how to change those things, which didn't. I think I'm trying to understand what God's idea of fatherhood is, and it's a very challenging thing because the world is such a challenging space, and it's like, how does a God exist in this space with all these things that happen? But we've been given free will, and free will is beautiful. It's also dangerous. You have your kid, and you want to take care of the kid, and you make sure they don't get hurt. Fine. And you teach them and give them tools to live a life. There is that. But you've also given them free will, because you can't control them. And when you do, it's not great. So you have to give them free will to be who they are. But you will always be there in the shadows, especially when they become an adult. You will always be there. And it's like when they fall, it's like, okay, I've got you. And I think that's how I see my relationship with God. It's like I've been given free will to do amazing things. I've been given a gift. And I'm fortunate that people buy into this gift as an artist and as a person. And, my connection to God. And, sometimes when I even struggle with ideas of how to create something, I can sometimes have a prayer and I have some time to myself. And then it helps me kind of work through things. And, I get, just connections and beautiful things.
How do you feel then? I'm gonna do it since we've scratched it. We scratched that surface. How do you feel about the sense of essentially having to park part of who you believe you are, your sense of I am this person filled with free will, and you already parked a part of that sense of who you are as an individual when you got married. And then you gave up a little piece of your identity to your wife, and I believe that's what happens when you enter into that. And then when you have a child, there's a greater piece of you that then becomes, and there's another chunk of my identity, and now I become, in the eyes of particular of this one person, you are that piece of you that you think is you and how you've defined yourself, that doesn't exist in the eyes of your child, because your child only sees you as the father. That other person doesn't exist. So there's these pieces of your identity that are now having to kind of like meet somewhere. So how do you feel about this changing, evolving form of yourself, sense of self?
So you just hit on a word there, evolving sense of yourself. The older we get, there is an evolution and growth that happens. Now, growth doesn't happen by that seed being the same seed. There's a germination. Now, through germination, there's a pull and there's a push and pull to break out of that seed. So this seed becomes this little sprout, and then it ends up becoming this tree. But through that whole period, there is a lot of adversity, weather conditions, not enough nutrients in the soil. But through that period, this person evolves, or this plant evolves into a big oak tree. That doesn't come by a, hey, rainbows and gummy bear, journey. It doesn't. It is more, it's filled with adversity. It's filled with high points. It's filled with low points. So all of those, but at the end of this, we all look at that oak tree and we're like, my God, that's majestic. It didn't come about by just, oh, it's all great. So when I look at when I got married, right? Yes, my life changed, but I found out I actually became a better person. Now I became a better person. So
because we become better people when we're less self-involved.
There. And the challenge of that we have these days in societies, it's the word autonomous. It's me. But actually, no, there is me, and me is important, and me sometimes is at the center of this whole thing. But then there are all these people that are brought along you, community, family, friends, and they are supposed to also, you're supposed to give to them, and they're supposed to give to you, and you become a better person. So this is a very typical example. I'm very impatient. I get that from my mom. She's very impatient. I'm like, yeah, let's go. So my wife is the most chilled person I know. She's like, and she's the youngest of 5 girls. So she is like super chill. Now, obviously you can see the clash here. So I'm like, woman, we need to go. Go, 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 go. You're taking too long. This caused a lot of friction at the beginning of our marriage. So, going through marriage courses, understanding how to make your marriage work. So, and when I say a marriage course, it's like, well, why wouldn't I do a marriage course? I have a car that has an MOT. I need to do it. I need to take care of the car. Or I have, I took out a mortgage, and that's the biggest contract. It's not, but it's the second biggest contract. I need to read the fine print.
I think you can get out of a marriage easier, to be honest.
Exactly, you can. So I needed to learn to be a bit more patient and sit outside myself for a minute. So I thought that, hey, my life is great. I'm single. When I was single, I'm a sane person. I'm all right. So there's nothing. And then you get married and you're like, okay, maybe everything wasn't as great as I thought it was, because you get this mirror saying, we're struggling here because you don't want to do this. So I have to give. And then strangely enough, I found when I started to give, my wife starts to give. And then we meet in the middle. So I'm not as impatient as I was. And I thought that was normal because that's how we were in our family. I'm not as impatient. I've learned to be calmer and be more present. And my wife is like, okay, maybe I shouldn't be as chilled because life, I need to do stuff. And we're meeting in the middle. Now, all of that, me learning to be patient, is now preparing me for my children. I'm about to be a father. And one thing, as you know, you have to be patient with children. So it's all about, it's that whole thing of the oak tree. To get to the oak tree, there is change that has to happen. And sometimes we need to be a bit more open to that change and know that some of these things are working to refine character and change persona, because we are not perfect. We were broken from, past trauma. And sometimes, being with somebody can help. Sometimes it doesn't, but sometimes if you're fortunate, it can help refine who you are as a person. But it's a bit of a journey.
I love that. I loved all that. That was great. I would have normally just said that was great, and we would have called it there. There's one thing I meant to ask, actually, and I would kill myself if I forgot to. Women feature so heavily throughout your work, and I believe, at least from what I've read, that this is a very conscious decision. Who are the women, and what are some of the stories that you're trying to tell? Because I don't believe it's just an aesthetic choice.
Yeah, sure. It's not. So I'm inspired by my mother. My mom was the first woman that I got to know, that I got to see. She informed my ideas about womanhood. She was quite a powerful character. She's very strong, very bullish, stubborn, but also quite caring to a fault. And so I saw all these different aspects to womanhood through her. And then my dad's sisters as well were quite powerful characters, and sometimes they would clash with her because they were quite powerful characters. So that was the beginning. And then as I grew older, I started to see all these different shades of womanhood, from how they look to how they see the world to different personalities. And so that was always bubbling there, just in the back of my head. And I'm amazed by when they keep the homes. They do a lot of things within the space, at least in the Nigerian context. And then when I started to go back to Nigeria, when I'd been living here for a while, it was a European way of womanhood. I started to see that. So that was completely different. And then going back, I started to see some of the challenges of womanhood in terms of women were treated as second-class citizens in Nigeria. The women don't have as much say in things, or they do sometimes, but they are not treated equal to men by any stretch. And we're not talking it's like there to there. No, it's the woman, your job, even if you have a PhD, your job is to be a cook or be a wife throughout those babies, and that's sometimes a it is a patriarchal structure. So for me, the work is to celebrate womanhood, to edify womanhood. It's because of these women that I saw as a kid, and they made such a strong impact on me as a person. I want to celebrate women, and more especially celebrate the Black woman, because I know I don't fully know everything, but I know some of the challenges they've been through. I'm also, some of the work that I did where I was talking about FGM, female genitalia mutilation, it's because I've seen the cultures that I love, but I've seen the damaging effects they've had on womanhood. So for me, it's to be able to use my work to talk about these and to just celebrate the culture, but also celebrate women within the space of culture.
So where does that leave men?
That's an interesting thing. And maybe this is also a reflection of my journey as a person. I was more drawn to women as a kid. I think that narrative is changing now, because I'm beginning to have a burden for men, because in the world that we live in, sometimes I find men are left out of the conversation, or they're left behind. And I'm not saying that, they're not inequalities. They are definitely inequalities between men and women, anything from pay gap to how men are treated compared to women. But I feel like if we don't, there are a lot of conversations with women right now. And that's because women are amazing at facilitating and pushing forward to making sure that women are treated right and there's equality there. But I also am beginning to think that men could end up being left behind, and there is, men struggle. There's a higher suicide rate now than there's ever been.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even think it's like a question. I think men are feeling isolated and feeling left behind, which is why when you look at, if you want to dig into the rise of far-right ideologies, the safe spaces created for Trumpism and things like that, this is fundamentally a failure to address the modern changes of masculinity, the changes in modern masculinity. So many people now just feel that this world has changed so fast and that they don't know who they are, because they believe, again, it goes back to this idea of what we're programmed to believe a man is supposed to be. And we're the protectors, we're the caregivers, the breadwinners. When these roles are challenged and changed, then the men aren't equipped. They don't have the support structure around them to be able to deal with these changes. Whereas women they talk, they know communities, they know their sisters, they know their support networks. They do this from day one, and they are equipped. A breakup, if a woman goes through a breakup, she's got her friends there, and they're talking the whole way through. Guys will go through a breakup and will take themselves down to the pub and just have a drink or something like that, And it's a sweeping generalization, but this idea of kind of a failure to address modern masculinity is definitely I believe it's a real thing.
Yeah, it definitely is a real thing. And as a culture and as a society, the way to move forward is together. It is not leaving anyone behind. And I'm not negating the stuff that's happened in the past about, different inequalities. For me, it is, how do we move together as a society? Because one can't move ahead without the other. Mm-hmm. We kind of have to do this together. So we have to make sure that nobody's left behind and men aren't struggling. So men haven't featured as much in my work, but maybe that's something that's going to change. When you see any male figures in my work, it's actually me. They're usually self-portraits, and there's a lot of introspection there. And some of it is about masculinity. Some of it is about, I'm not, it's interesting. I'm not like a man's man. That's not who I am. I have certain. It's hard to say it. It's not hard to say it, but it's one of the. Is it effeminate qualities? I don't know what the hell. You know, I don't.
Effeminate qualities of softness.
Yeah. I am.
Same with your chest, man.
Oh no.
Effeminate qualities.
Yeah, but it's not. I know who I am, but it's more. I just don't know what the phrasing is, because there's so many new words that come out every day that I can't keep up with stuff. But so I'm happy and comfortable in being that way. And so some of that stuff is reflected in the work. It's exploring that, because when I was growing up, I was trying to understand, you know, be a man or not be a man. And what is that? If I'm softer spoken on certain things, or I have an affinity to maybe care or deal with women's issues, then what does that? And so for me, it was being comfortable in who I am. This is who I'm made to be. And they're very variations of masculinity. And masculinity, we don't, you know, there's some men who are men's men. And there's a beauty in that as well. We can't just have everybody being the same, but we have to have a moral compass, you know, in that, to be able to treat people fairly and to love and understand each other. So, you know, they're varying things, upbringing, different things, but kind of have to just be loving towards one. And it sounds very, be loving, but actually, I think in some ways, I think that might be the way forward. Be open to somebody else. Give them respect. These are your views about life. Okay, that's okay. They're not my views, but we can still sit down and have a drink and talk about the things which are challenging to us or the things that make us happy.
And on that note, I'm going to say, Àsìkò, thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Doug.
That was great.
Thank you.
That was Àsìkò in conversation with me, Doug Gillen, here on Radio Juxtapoz. Once again, thank you to everyone at the MTR agency for letting us hijack their office space to record that interview. And don't forget, from the 16th of March, you can check out Àsìkò as part of the group exhibition Rites of Passage on display at the Britannia St Gagosian in London. That's it from me just now. As always, we will be back with you guys real soon. Till then, take care of yourselves and each other.